On a chilling, moonless night, I embarked on what would become the most harrowing pizza delivery of my life. The destination was a remote place, a forsaken 20-minute drive from the pizza place. The thought of the generous tip for delivering 4 large pies to a party consoled me as I navigated the winding dirt roads that snaked through the desolate landscape. The given address led me to an eerie, decrepit building nestled in a clearing deep within a sinister forest. No cars occupied the surroundings, and no lights pierced the gloom. I parked my car, and uncertainty gnawed at me. Doubt gripped my mind, and I decided to call my boss, repeating the address to him 3 times in a futile attempt to find an error. He answered with irritation in his voice, instructing me to knock on the door and investigate. My boss had a reputation for being miserly, and the thought of returning with 4 untouched pizzas was unthinkable. So, despite my growing unease, I reluctantly stepped out of my car and approached the ominous building's front door. No doorbell was in sight, so I knocked forcefully. Silence enveloped me, amplifying my disappointment. Desperation made me knock once more, and this time I heard a faint rustling from inside the building. My heart raced as I knocked again, announcing my presence as the pizza delivery guy. Silence greeted me. As I turned to leave, my eyes darted toward a window. A figure stared back, their eyes unnaturally wide, a malevolent intensity in their gaze. Panic gripped me, and I dropped the pizzas, sprinting back to my car. My car sputtered to life with the 3rd turn of the key, and I sped away from the building. But something was amiss. The car juddered and shuddered, the road providing unusual resistance. I barely made it a short distance before the vehicle ground to a halt. Fear coursed through me as I stepped out, my heart beating erratically. All 4 tires had been slashed, hanging in tatters from their rims. A realization gnawed at me. Someone had done this while I was at the building's door, and panic welled within me. Instead of fleeing, I locked myself in the car, haunted by the proximity of the ominous building hidden behind the trees. I dialed 911, recounting the eerie events to the operator. She assured me that the police were on their way, advising me to stay hidden and locked in the car. I questioned whether I should run, but she urged me to stay put. My body trembled as I waited for the distant wailing sirens to draw nearer. Dark, endless forest surrounded me, and the response time felt interminable. Still, I dared not leave the car, my heart pounding with every second that passed. But then, a chilling revelation shattered what little composure I had left. Glancing into the rearview mirror, I beheld the same figure, those wide, malevolent eyes now unmistakably belonging to a woman. Her unsettling grin slowly materialized, casting a grotesque shadow over her features. Without a second thought, I flung the car door open and sprinted into the wilderness, heedless of the noise I made. Fear propelled me onward until exhaustion overcame me, and I crouched behind a massive fallen log. I struggled to stifle my rapid breaths, my hand clamped over my mouth as I waited, trembling. Eternity seemed to pass before I heard the distant sirens drawing nearer, their echoing wails a symphony of salvation. Summoning every ounce of strength left within me, I retraced my steps toward the dirt road. Red and blue lights pierced the inky darkness as the police vehicles arrived at my abandoned car. I emerged, a frantic stream of words tumbling from my lips, and collapsed to the ground, overwhelmed by the ordeal. The officers, their flashlights cutting through the gloom, inquired about the terrifying events. I recounted everything to the best of my ability, describing the sinister building and the ghastly woman who had slashed my tires. One of the patrol cars ventured to the building while the other officers remained with me. Their search yielded nothing except a pair of sharp, spiked objects identical to those that had destroyed my tires. The police surmised that a malevolent couple was responsible, but the culprits were never apprehended, leaving me haunted by the nightmarish encounter. In the aftermath, I abandoned my job as a pizza delivery driver and sought refuge in the relative safety of a local grocery store. The image of that woman's chilling gaze in my rearview mirror would forever haunt my nightmares, a reminder of the horrors lurking just beyond the veil of darkness. When I was just 16, I found myself working in a quiet suburban town on the outskirts of a sprawling metropolis. Initially, I toiled away helping the chef in the kitchen and performing various cleaning tasks at the local pizza joint. However, fate had a different plan in store for me. 2 months into my employment, the main delivery boy announced his abrupt departure. He appeared haunted, with a look of sheer terror etched upon his face. There was something in his eyes, something he couldn't put into words. He stormed into my boss's office, and a heated argument ensued, lasting a tense 15 minutes. When he finally emerged, he muttered a cryptic farewell, "Good luck, kid," before vanishing into the night, leaving me perplexed. Though he claimed it was just a lousy job, I sensed there was more to his departure than met the eye. Nevertheless, I brushed it aside, dismissing it as the musings of an overactive imagination. Little did I know that his unsettling departure would lead me into a nightmarish ordeal. For the next couple of weeks, I assumed the role of the pizza delivery guy until they could find a replacement. It was business as usual until my boss handed me an address one evening. I programmed it into the GPS, anticipating a quick delivery so I could return home before the night's darkness fully enveloped the town. Unfortunately, fate had other plans. The address led me deep into the rural outskirts of town, where houses were spaced a quarter-mile apart. As I approached the destination, my unease grew. The house stood before me, a 2-story structure that radiated malevolence. The lawn was unkempt, overrun by weeds, the trees withered and lifeless, and the porch devoid of any signs of life, such as chairs, flower pots, or tables. It appeared abandoned, and every fiber of my being screamed at me to leave, to drive away, and never look back. But duty compelled me to get out of the car. I reluctantly approached the door, praying that my boss had given me the wrong address, offering me an escape route from this eerie place. As I reached for the doorbell, an inexplicable tremor of dread coursed through my veins. The doorknob rattled, and the door creaked open, revealing an elderly woman, at least 70 years old. Her white hair framed a face with missing teeth, and her frail, emaciated frame stood barely above 5 feet. Yet, her eyes, piercing and unsettling, bore into my soul. Summoning every ounce of courage, I managed a friendly greeting. "Pepperoni pizza, ma'am?" She replied with a hoarse voice that sent shivers down my spine, her eyes never leaving mine. I extended the pizza, but she made no move to accept it, her expression devoid of emotion. With trembling hands, she reached for her purse, and I expected her to produce the payment. However, her hands disappeared within the bag, and minutes stretched into an agonizing eternity. A nameless terror washed over me as I watched her, unable to comprehend the delay. Then she froze, her eyes fixing upon me with an intensity that defied logic. I sensed that she clutched something within her purse, concealed from my view. Panic overtook me as I wondered if it was a weapon, pepper spray, a knife, or worse, a firearm. Why would it take so long to retrieve a few dollars for payment? Just when I thought the situation couldn't become any more disturbing, a shadowy figure emerged behind her. A man, middle-aged and filled with anger, approached the door. His voice, deep and menacing, reverberated as he muttered, "Hey." Simultaneously, I heard footsteps to my left, the leaves crunching beneath someone's weight. I turned to glimpse a man's head peeking over the porch, his face etched with fury as he began to climb the steps. It was then that I realized I had no choice but to flee. Panic propelled me back to my car. I tossed the pizza inside, started the engine, and sped away, not daring to glance back. The darkness of the night swallowed me whole, and I didn't look back until I was at a safe distance. I had left the pizza behind, and I would have to pay for it out of my own pocket. But the relief of escaping that eerie house, the dread of what might have occurred had I stayed, eclipsed any monetary concern. Days later, I gathered the courage to share my horrifying experience with my boss, who reacted with shock and concern. He promptly reported the incident to the police, and after a thorough investigation, they uncovered that the house had been abandoned for over a year. 3 individuals, including the elderly woman I had encountered, were discovered living there. All three were arrested, but the specifics of their intentions remained shrouded in mystery. Terrified by the ordeal, I quit my job without hesitation, haunted by the thought of what might have transpired had I remained at that sinister house. I worked as a night driver, one of those delivering food to satisfy the nocturnal cravings of hungry souls looking to appease their midnight appetites. My gig typically involved the weekend, especially Friday and Saturday nights, when the town would come alive with orders from folks either lounging at home or reveling with friends. One fateful Saturday night, around the bewitching hour of 1 a.m., I received a delivery request from a guy named Kyle. He resided just a stone's throw away from my current location, so I figured it would be a quick and easy run. The order was a modest one, consisting of 2 hamburgers. Given its proximity to the nearest McDonald's, I accepted the order without hesitation. As I followed the app's directions, they led me to a forsaken part of town. The road seemed to stretch on endlessly, with houses spaced out like isolated islands in a sea of darkness. I eventually found myself on a short, dead-end street that branched off another dead-end road. Kyle's house occupied the very end of this isolated path, nestled beside a line of trees that ran alongside a desolate highway. The atmosphere was eerie as the hour was late, and the entire street appeared abandoned. Ignoring my instincts to leave, I summoned the courage to carry out my duty. However, the thought of ringing the doorbell seemed inappropriate at such an hour, so I decided to give Kyle a call instead. My attempt to reach him by phone was met with a single ring before diverting to voicemail. Perplexed, I ended the call, only to receive a text from Kyle instructing me to come to the door. With a sigh of relief, I approached the front porch and rang the bell, bracing myself for the encounter. The door creaked open, revealing a middle-aged man, completely bald. His appearance was unremarkable for his age, but his breath reeked of alcohol and an unsettling drunkenness clung to him. Despite my unease, I chose not to judge his condition, attributing it to personal circumstances. Since payments were typically processed through the app, there was no need to linger for money. However, this time, Kyle made a peculiar request. He asked me to place the pizza on his kitchen table while he retrieved a tip. Seeing an opportunity for a gratuity, I agreed, waiting in his dimly lit kitchen illuminated only by a small, feeble nightlight. A peculiar odor permeated the air, lending the room a grotesque atmosphere. Anxious to leave, I grew impatient as Kyle's absence dragged on. I decided to explore the adjacent living room, where the smell intensified, its source elusive. In the darkness, I barely made out a television playing, casting eerie shadows across the room. As I contemplated the strange odor, I noticed that the back door was slightly ajar, as if someone had been trying to air out the room. I approached it, hoping to catch a breath of fresh air, but to my horror, the smell only grew more pungent. Stepping outside onto the back deck, I was met with a cacophony of fleas buzzing incessantly. A motion-sensing light flickered on, revealing 2 hefty black garbage bags, their contents shrouded in darkness. The stench was unbearable, and my instincts screamed at me to leave. Without delay, I re-entered the house, racing toward the front door. It was then that I heard Kyle ascending from the basement, calling my name. He held a few bills in his hand, and as he approached, he inquired about my sudden departure. Desperate for a quick exit, I fabricated an excuse about needing to check my car. He nodded in understanding, and as he moved closer, I realized he was holding something in his right hand. Panic surged through me, and I considered the possibility of a weapon concealed within his grasp. In a desperate bid to escape, I opened the door, planning to flee to my car. But Kyle grabbed my shoulder, his grip iron tight. I tore myself free, bolting toward my car without a second thought. As I sped away from his ominous abode, I saw Kyle sprinting back into his house, the front door still wide open. A sense of dread washed over me as I drove down the block, determined to call the police and report the unsettling encounter. I reached out to the authorities, providing them with Kyle's information and the distressing details of my visit. Within mere minutes, police cars converged on the scene. From a distance, I watched as officers arrived, uncovering a macabre sight. Kyle, or whoever he truly was, had begun relocating the bags, which indeed contained lifeless bodies, to the bushes in his backyard. The entire ordeal had been a grotesque nightmare, from the eerie house to the peculiar request for pizza delivery. It was evident that Kyle was not only deranged, but also utterly devoid of intelligence. As the police took charge of the situation, I knew I had narrowly escaped a sinister fate, one that still haunts my nightmares to this day. The Poconos, a remote and rural area, concealed its secrets beneath a canopy of towering trees. This particular night, I found myself navigating those winding, fog-shrouded roads during my late-night delivery shift. The obsidian darkness pressed in from all sides, and a chilling unease hung in the air. I was on my way to town, taking a shortcut that had become a familiar route over time. The thick fog seemed to swallow the road ahead, reducing visibility to almost nothing. The solitude was eerie, with only the dense woods as my companions. As my car sliced through the fog, I slammed on the brakes with a jolt. A figure had materialized out of the mist, leaping from the obscurity of the bushes onto the road. The sickening thud and dull bump that reverberated through my car confirmed the grim reality. I had struck a person. My heart pounded in my chest as I sat there in stunned disbelief. I couldn't fathom what had just transpired. The air grew thick with tension as I wrestled with my shock and guilt. I had hit a person. Trembling, I reluctantly emerged from my vehicle, uncertain of what I would find. The figure lay motionless by the tire of my car, a man in a black hoodie, his hood drawn up to conceal his identity. Panic gnawed at me as I stood there, torn between fear and a sense of responsibility. I couldn't leave him there, injured and alone. I had to check if he was all right. I approached the man with caution, my breath hitching in my throat. He remained sprawled on the ground, offering no indication of his condition. Desperation clawed at me as I contemplated what to do next. Why was this man in the middle of nowhere? What had compelled him to jump in front of my car? Just as I was about to make a decision, an eerie scream pierced the silence. A cry for help echoed from the woods to my left, sending a shiver down my spine. Someone was in distress, and my instincts propelled me into action. I couldn't abandon the injured man, but I also couldn't ignore the plea for help. I made a split-second choice to investigate the scream, hoping to find answers and assistance for both individuals. Leaving the man by my car, I ventured toward the source of the cry, my footsteps crunching on the forest floor. The fog, dense and suffocating, obscured my vision, adding to the overall sense of dread that engulfed me. I called out, desperately seeking another sign of distress, but the forest answered with an eerie silence. The only sounds were those of the nocturnal creatures, their eerie symphony accompanying my relentless pursuit. "Where are you?" I yelled into the void, my voice trembling with anxiety. Yet the forest offered no response, leaving me to question the authenticity of the initial scream. Just as I was about to give up and return to my car, a sound pierced the silence, the crunch of leaves beneath a footstep. My heart pounded as I turned toward the noise, straining my eyes to make out any form in the inky blackness. There, hidden behind a tree, stood a figure. The figure remained obscured by the fog, a silhouette that triggered an indescribable sense of unease. Panic welled up within me, urging me to flee, but curiosity kept me rooted to the spot. My eyes locked on the shadowy figure. Suddenly, the forest came alive with the sound of crushing leaves as the figure advanced toward me. Panic surged, and I bolted back to my car, casting fearful glances over my shoulder to ensure I wasn't being pursued. When I reached my vehicle, breathless and terrified, the man I had hit was nowhere to be found. The fog obscured any trace of him. Without hesitation, I leaped into my car, the engine roaring to life as I sped away from that eerie location. The drive back was a blur of anxiety and fear. I couldn't shake the dread that clung to me, nor the chilling encounter with the figure in the woods. As I pulled up to my delivery destination, I was desperate to leave this night behind. I rang the bell, and a middle-aged woman answered the door. She paid for her pizza, but her gaze lingered on something behind me. I turned to find her eyes fixed on the back seat of my car. Puzzled, I asked her what she meant. She questioned whether I had a delivery partner, someone else in the car with me. My stomach churned as I realized that there was no one else in my vehicle. My mind raced with confusion and fear. I immediately contacted the police using the woman's phone, trembling with anxiety as I recounted the night's eerie events. The authorities arrived swiftly, but to my horror, the person in the back seat of my car had vanished. The most terrifying discovery was yet to come. The police found a blood-stained knife on the floor of my car, right where the mysterious figure had been hiding. It was a chilling revelation that left me haunted by the night's events, forever wondering what could have transpired if I hadn't completed that fateful delivery. At the tender age of 17, I toiled as a pizza delivery boy for a local pizzeria. The countless deliveries I'd made had numbed me to the monotony of my job. My trusty old Toyota, a hand-me-down from my parents, had seen its fair share of night drives through the quiet streets of our town. On that eerie Friday or Saturday night, the moon shrouded itself in thick clouds, casting an ominous pall over the darkened town. My boss, Mario, had provided the details for my next delivery: a single pizza for a woman named Karen. It struck me as odd. The address was unusually distant, a 15-minute drive from the pizzeria. Most orders fell within a 5-minute radius, so I held out hope for a generous tip to justify the trek. With the pizza safely nestled beside me, I embarked on my journey, my trusty playlist providing a modicum of solace. The wheels of my car spun through the empty streets, steering me toward an unknown destination. The address led me to a seemingly deserted part of town. Dilapidated houses lined the eerily quiet street, a testament to the neighborhood's economic struggles. As I pulled up in front of the address, a faint glow emanated from a single window on the first floor. Approaching the house, I prepared to complete the delivery. It was well past 11 p.m., and my patience had dwindled. I rang the doorbell, only to be met with silence. I tried again, my finger pressing the button more firmly this time, but still, there was no response. A minute stretched into an eternity before a voice finally pierced the stillness. A woman's voice called from within, apologizing for the delay. However, it took her another agonizing minute to open the door. The threshold of patience had been crossed. As the door creaked open, I was met with the gaze of a woman in her mid-40s who flashed me an unsettlingly flirtatious smile. Her name, Karen, presumably matched the one on the order. But what left me flustered was her uncanny scrutiny, as if she were sizing me up from head to toe. Another woman, Chelsea, emerged from the shadows, mirroring Karen's unsettling appraisal of me. My adolescent shyness turned my cheeks a shade of crimson, and I struggled to navigate this unexpected and rather provocative encounter. Amidst my discomfort, they invited me inside, their voices hinting at inebriation. It seemed evident that they had been indulging in more than just pizza. Their intentions grew increasingly unclear as they probed my age, and I nervously inflated it to 21. They chuckled, unfazed by my blatant lie, and beckoned me to join them in their wine-fueled revelry. Although I despised the taste of wine, I played along, sipping gingerly to maintain my facade. The atmosphere grew increasingly surreal, like an adolescent fantasy unfolding before my eyes. The women's flirty antics escalated, lavishing compliments on my dimples and my bashful demeanor. But it was apparent that their drunkenness had tipped into a realm of strange unpredictability. Their propositions grew bolder, and it became evident that they had something else in mind. They broached the subject of revealing a secret in their basement, their coy hints bordering on the mysterious. Eagerly, I accepted their invitation, my imagination racing with tantalizing possibilities. However, reality had something far more sinister in store. I cautiously approached the basement's entrance, my inquiry for the light switch met with an unsettling refusal. With an eerie insistence, they urged me to descend into the darkness, their laughter masking an ominous intent. Bracing myself for excitement, I ventured downward, eager to uncover their secret. But as my eyes adjusted to the dimly lit basement, an unsettling sensation gnawed at me. A vague movement in the shadows. Was it a hand or an arm? I could not be certain. I turned to find the women creeping toward the basement door, their actions increasingly peculiar. A sense of unease washed over me, prompting me to step back from the basement's threshold. As I did, the women's laughter abruptly ceased, replaced by eerie smiles. With a sense of foreboding, I inquired about what lay below, their response a chilling, synchronized declaration. "It's a surprise." Their collective tone sent shivers down my spine. I began to retreat, the temptation to uncover their secret overridden by an overwhelming sense of danger. My urgency to leave was palpable as I approached the front door. It was then that I saw him, a towering, hulking man framed in the doorway of an adjacent room, likely the kitchen. His presence filled me with dread as he calmly uttered 5 words that continued to haunt my nightmares. "Let's just make this easy." Panic surged through me as I pivoted toward the front door. In haste, I declared that the pizza was free and fled to open the door. I slammed it shut behind me, but I could hear it creak open once more, the relentless man outside. In a blind rush, I hurled myself into my car, locked the doors, and started the engine. Through the passenger side window, I could see the ominous figure outside, attempting to open the door and knocking on the glass. I sped away, leaving that dreadful scene behind. My heart raced, my mind tormented by the encounter. When I returned to the pizzeria, I relayed the night's horrors to my boss and colleagues, who could only react with stunned disbelief. The first call I made was to the non-emergency line, reporting the incident as a precaution. Whatever trap had lurked within that basement, I had narrowly escaped its grasp, a chilling encounter etched forever in my memory. Working at a pizza joint in the heart of Chicago wasn't the most glamorous gig, but it put some extra cash in my pocket. Unfortunately, my boss seemed to have an uncanny knack for scheduling me on the shittiest shifts, weekend nights, prime time for peculiar customers, and eerie encounters. My pleas for day shifts fell on deaf ears, and I often found myself traversing the city's dark corners in the dead of night. Sure, being a pizza delivery guy comes with its fair share of dangers, but nothing could have prepared me for the spine-chilling ordeal that unfolded a few months ago. It all began with a customer, one that was known for his bizarre antics over the phone. His calls ranged from abruptly hanging up on us to placing orders while making unnerving sounds in the background. We figured he was just some dimwit trying to play pranks, but his strange comments lingered like a sinister shadow. One particularly unsettling call stood out. He placed a pizza order in his typical cryptic fashion, but added a disturbing twist. "I want a large pizza with pineapples, mustard, and your skin," he had muttered. It sent shivers down my spine, and we promptly terminated the call. His number was now etched into our system, a harbinger of impending weirdness. The peculiar customer resurfaced once more, dialing our number and placing an order devoid of the usual nonsense. This time, he gave an actual address, and curiosity got the better of me. What could possibly await me at his doorstep? The prospect of encountering this enigmatic caller compelled me to accept the delivery. I drove through the labyrinthine streets, inching closer to his peculiar location. The GPS led me to a dilapidated house that could have been ripped straight from a horror movie. It teetered on the periphery of our delivery zone, far removed from the bustling heart of the city. The aged structure appeared to have weathered the ravages of time for a century or more, its windows devoid of any welcoming light. I wasn't gripped by fear. Instead, an odd sense of anticipation filled me. I was eager to finally put a face to the mysterious voice that had taunted us. With the pizza box in hand, I proceeded to the front door, attempting to suppress the mounting unease that the eerie surroundings threatened to evoke. As I reached the door, I pressed the bell, only to be met with silence. I gave it a few more attempts, but the doorbell seemed to be out of commission. I resorted to knocking, hammering the wooden surface in the hopes of prompting a response. After a seemingly endless wait, the door creaked open, revealing a figure. He sported a strange mask that concealed his mouth but left his eyes exposed. Those eyes, wide, unblinking, stared at me with an unsettling intensity. With a gulp, I informed him of the pizza's cost, apologizing for the omission of his soda. It was then that I noticed the peculiar mask covering his mouth, and a deep sense of unease washed over me. He took a moment, as if pondering my words, then mumbled, "It's okay." His eyes remained locked onto mine, as though searching for something beneath the surface. A prolonged silence hung heavy in the air before he finally spoke again. "Has anyone ever attacked you before?" he inquired, his voice an eerie whisper. My instincts kicked in, and I firmly replied, "No, and if they did, they'd regret it." Something about his demeanor left me deeply unsettled. With an unsettling smile, he removed his mask, revealing grotesque scars that marred the area around his mouth. I couldn't fathom their origin, and an eerie sense of dread coursed through me. His lips, cracked and weathered, formed a sinister grin. Sensing that he had no intention of paying, I decided to make my exit. I turned my back to him, descending the porch steps, but before I could make my escape, he unleashed a blood-curdling scream, shattering the silence. It chilled me to the bone, an unexpected jolt of terror that left me breathless. Panicked and unnerved, I hurriedly made my way back to my car. I locked the doors with trembling hands and cranked the engine to life. Through the passenger side window, I could see him, lurking ominously outside. His eyes bore into mine, and he made futile attempts to pry open the door. Without a second thought, I peeled out of there, leaving behind that nightmare of a man. Upon my return to the pizzeria, I recounted the spine-tingling encounter to my boss and coworkers. Their expressions mirrored my disbelief, and we collectively decided to blacklist the creepy customer from our deliveries. His subsequent calls were met with a strict dismissal, leading to a crescendo of angry outbursts and menacing curses. Though I had narrowly escaped that eerie, nightmarish house, the memory of that chilling scream and those haunting scars still claw at the recesses of my mind.